What's up, everybody? Welcome to Botchilism. I'm Bob Botchie. I'm your host. On this episode, we're going to talk about the fact that I am absolutely not at all bashing the restaurant industry. I know I talk about a lot of really dark shit, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that I love the restaurant industry and it was the greatest time of my life. And I don't want to give the impression that I'm against the restaurant industry or that I'm bashing the restaurant industry. I just don't want to I don't want to do that at all. I love the restaurant industry. It was the best time of my life. And all those things I talk about, the exhaustion and the mental fatigue and all that stuff. It's just a byproduct, and it's just a small byproduct. It's not the whole it's not the whole enchilada. Um, you get a lot out of the restaurant business. Uh, there's a lot of camaraderie because you're all going through the same shit. You're all battling the same shit. The servers are busy, the cooks are busy, the managers are busy, and you help each other out. And it develops this camaraderie. Now in the kitchen, it's like soldiers. You've been through battles so many times that you just have this bond, and you don't even have to be in the same kitchen. Cooks just have a bond, and it comes from that battle mentality. You fighting for a whole shift, and then when it's over, you go tell your war stories to all the other cooks. That you see at the bar or whatever, and you build this bond like a brotherhood. You show, oh, I got a scar tonight. Look what I did. I burned myself on the stove. I cut my hand open. Can you believe I did this stupid thing? Rookie mistake. I cut my hand. And you just develop this camaraderie, and it's an amazing bond from talking from one cook to another, especially if you don't know each other. I told a story before about someone I knew sitting on the train, but it's even funnier when you're at you just got off a long shift, you're exhausted, you're just sitting on the train on the way home, and you look over and you see someone with a blue band-aid on. You're like, oh, how was your service tonight? And they just look at you like, this magical connection, like, oh, another cook, because we don't get to interact with the general public like the servers do, so we're kind of locked in the kitchen. So when there's someone else that you can talk about being in the kitchen with, even if you don't know them, there's just an instant bond. And it happened to me a million times on the train. See someone with a knife roll. A knife roll is the case where you store all your knives so they don't get dull. You see someone with a knife roll, and you never worry about whether or not they're going to want you to talk to them, despite how tired they are. Cooks just talk to each other. So you see another cook on the train, you walk over, you're like, "Hey, what's up? My name's Bob. You know, how was your shift tonight?" And that's just it's one of the greatest bonds because how often can you just walk up to someone and just start a conversation without them being like, "What the fuck are you doing?" But with a cook, it doesn't matter. You see another cook, you go up and you talk to them, and they never get mad, because they have stories to tell. You have stories to tell. Like I said, you exchange. Look what I did to my hand. I burned my eye with steam tonight. That's happened to me. So you just you tell stories like friends getting together. Um, but that bond can be broken if there's a bad cook in the kitchen. It can actually disrupt the whole flow, which means you don't get that bond as much. Like one cook can spoil the whole kitchen. Um, so if you're working in a kitchen and someone's not pulling their weight, or someone's just tanking the whole kitchen with bad dishes, the bond is strained. Uh, Servers have a similar thing. Servers tend to be more like family than soldiers. Let's say. The servers all go through a completely different set of things in the front of the house, but they're no less battle hardened, and they get to be more like family. There's a most restaurants, there's a real family vibe in the front of the house. Daily staff meetings and everything are usually fun, and they're joking around and laughing and talking about the service that's coming. So they bond on a different level than the cooks, but no less important. They tend to be more like family, and that's straight from the top. Owners, managers, servers, busboys, food runners. You know, you go through so much together. You develop a bond, and I've been seeing that all my life. You know what I mean? People in my family were bartenders or stuff like that. You just see the bond that when they get together, especially outside of work. Forget it. The bond is ridiculous. And that's one of the great things that comes from the restaurant industry is the bond that even front of the house to back of the house, you depend on each other so much without the front of the house, the food's not going to the table. Without the back of the house, the food's not going to the table. So everyone's kind of fighting the same war in different ways. So you just develop this friendship, and it's you go out for a couple of beers with the servers after work, and they would talk about the customers, and you talk about how you fucked up this dish, and everyone kind of bonds over the whole experience of being in the restaurant business, and it's quite an experience. Um, you learn a lot in the restaurant from the kitchen perspective. Like there are life lessons that you learn by working in a kitchen. The most important is organization. You get so used to having everything organized that it slows you down. If you're reaching, you get to the point that you can just reach over and know that what you're looking for is going to be there. Like that's how hyper organized everything in a kitchen is. You don't have to search for things, and if you do, there's a problem. You did it wrong. Everything has its own place and everything in its place. We call that mise en place, which is my favorite thing in the whole world. I want to know beforehand that if I just reach out my hand, the protein that I'm looking for is going to be exactly where I think it's going to be, or the vegetables are here, or the salt's where I always keep it, so that it becomes like a ballet, like a rhythm. You just reaching and cooking, and that's one of the biggest life lessons that I learned from the kitchen because I brought that home with me. And you get home and you get used to like, all right, my toothbrush is always right here, my coffee cup is always right here. And even though I don't work in a kitchen anymore, I still you still keep that organization. And that was the first lesson that the restaurant taught me was if you're not organized, you're gonna fail. Um, Other things like so labeling for dates is that you put a put a product in a package. Like you're putting proteins in a container, or you cut up vegetables and you put them in a container, and then you label when you did that, so that you know about how long you have to keep them fresh. And it's quintessential to a restaurant, but it's just as important in your fridge at home. It's not a bad practice to have to label when you put things in there. It gives you a better idea, so you're not constantly smelling food to see if it's still good. You know what I mean? Or looking at it. You pick it up and you say, "Oh, all right. Well, I put this in the fridge on the 14th. That was 12 days ago. There's a good chance it's not good." You know what I mean? Inventory control is what it is. It's just instead of having to go through your whole fridge and find out what's good and what's bad, you already have a pretty good idea of the state of things in your fridge if you label them. And that's we live and die by that in the restaurant industry. You know, you go in the walk-in and you automatically look for the oldest date, which is inventory rotation. We call it FIFO, first in, first out. So the first product that comes in when you're running low on that and you get the same product in as a backup, you pull the older product forward and put the newer product behind it, so that you know that you use up all the old product before you even get into the new product. So that way you're not having things spoil. And they do that in supermarkets, they do it in the restaurant business. FIFO is I almost got FIFO tattooed because it's just so important. You don't want spoiled food sitting in the back of a walk-in. Um, Problem solving. Working in a restaurant, front of the house, back of the house, doesn't matter. Teaches you problem solving because you're gonna encounter a million problems in a single shift, and you have to be able to adapt on the fly. Everything's on the fly. You don't get time to sit down and think about, all right, well, how am I gonna fix this? You fix it, and you fix it fast. Because if you don't fix it fast, things start to spiral out of control, and then you end up working from behind the whole shift, like I had in that episode in the weeds. You end up in the weeds, and there's nothing worse than being in the weeds. So problem solving was something you learn quickly as a new cook, and there's little tricks. Older cooks give you tricks. This is what I do. Everyone does their own stuff. Uh, I remember one of my jobs was verbal. All the tickets were called out by the chef, and once you get in the weeds, I learned that I would take a single ingredient from the dish and put it down on my station. So I would have a certain number of dishes in my head that I owed, and anything after that, if it had a scallion in it, I would put a scallion on my station, so that when I looked down, I'd be like, all right, I need that fish because that scallion's there. So the little things like that, problem solving is so important. It's vital to staying afloat. Um, Learning how to work faster without losing quality is another one that's huge because quality is the most important ingredient in any dish. You want it to come out and you want it to be up to par to what's expected, and it also goes along with consistency. It's got to be concise. The consistency is key. You have to do the same dish every time. And you learn ways as you get more comfortable with the station, you learn ways to not cut corners. You never cut corners, but to build expediency. You get faster, you get more consistent. When you cut something the same way every day, it just becomes second nature and you get faster and faster and faster and faster. You get more precise, and it's it's a huge problem, especially with prep. I talk about prep all the time, but you know, learning how to prep faster and more efficiently makes you a better cook. So, restaurant teaches you problem solving like that too, and you find yourself, you know, even at home, confronted with a problem, and next thing you know, six other solutions are in your head because you're just so used to solving problems on the fly. Um, like a good example, if a dish is going to take 25 minutes in the oven. You sear it in a pan first, get a nice hot sear on the outside. That takes off some of the cooking time. Or if you're going to braise something, it's going to take 2.5, 3, 4 hours. If you just put it straight in the oven, it has to come up to temperature. So you're adding 45 minutes to an hour to the braise time. So if you put it on top of the stove and bring it up to a boil first, then put it in the oven, you're taking a lot of time off. Excuse me. That's just little things you learn. Like similar, think of braising like you cook rice. You bring the rice up to a boil, then you cover it, you turn it down to low, and you let it simmer for the rest of the time. Braising is the same kind of idea, except you're using proteins and vegetables and not just rice. So that's just a quick thing that you learn, but it's a time saver, and you need to save time. So you just learn all these little tricks, all these little ways to solve problems, and you learn all these things really quickly in the restaurant business. So you don't survive. It's a way to stay afloat. It keeps you going. You know, you you learn tricks all along the way in every step. You know, even the front of the house, you learn little tricks to navigate the dining room, to how to carry more than one dish at a time. Things that you don't have when you first get to the restaurant industry. Maybe you can't carry five plates at the same time. But if you're good, you're gonna end up being able to carry many plates as you possibly can so that you can get to the table faster. It's how you get your tips. You learn these traits and you learn these skills. And I'm not saying being able to carry five plates is going to relate to real life, but if you think about it in terms of balance, you learn how to balance these things. You can relate that to just finding balance in almost anything. If you can balance five plates on your hands, six plates on your hands, you have a good concept of balance in general. And it keeps you even keeled when you're working in the restaurant business about other things because you don't lose your cool as much when there's a little bit of stress because your whole job is stress. So you learn how not to sweat the small stuff as much. You learn how to roll with the punches, not to be completely cliche, but you know that's what it is. You learn how to adapt and adapt quickly, so that if something happens in the outside world, most of the time it's kind of minor compared to what you deal with every day. So your stress level when you're not in work is usually minimal or zero because no matter what happens during the day, it's nothing compared to what you're dealing with at work. So you learn how to relieve the pressure of you know basic stress. I'm not saying something bad happens, you're gonna let it roll off your back, but the little stresses that everyone goes through every day. When you work in a restaurant, you kind of, I guess you get thick skinned a little, I guess, and it just helps you deal with everyday normal average stress a lot better. So now I thought I did it a little bit in the first episode, but I thought I'd go into some depth into my background. Uh, oh, I'm sure you're wondering, who is this guy? Why am I watching this podcast? So I figured I'd give you a little background, or a lot of background, probably. Uh, I didn't start cooking until my 30s. I did a bunch of shit before that. I was in construction. I built circuit boards. I did whatever I could do. I was just never happy, and I didn't stay at any jobs for too long because it just wasn't for me. Jump from electrician to laborer to whatever I could get my hands on. Telephones, moving refrigerators for a living, just jumping around anywhere there was a job. And then I got laid off from one job, and I was laid off for 8 months. And I pretty much stayed at home because I didn't have a whole lot of money. I was laid off. I sat home and I watched the Food Network. I was 31, I think. So laid off, sitting at home, watching the Food Network. Started watching Iron Chef all the time. Became absolutely obsessed with Iron Chef, and by proxy, started watching all the Bobby Flay shows and started mimicking what he was doing on the show to see if I could do it because I was never really a cook. When I was, growing up, I was a meat and potatoes guy. I didn't eat seafood. I didn't eat broccoli. I didn't eat anything. It was pretty much meat and potatoes, maybe a salad. So I had a long way to go to learn how to cook. I didn't know anything. I could grill a steak, so I thought, but I didn't know. I didn't have any culinary knowledge. So I started watching TV and following what they were all doing. And the more I did it, the more I started watching the other shows to see how other people did things, and started cooking for my family and my friends. And then my mother one day was like, "I think you should go to culinary school." And I was like, I'm in my 30s. I can't go back to college. I can't jump into the kitchen. That's a young man's game. But she talked me into it. She talked me into going to culinary school. And the very next morning when I woke up, I turned on my computer and I opened Facebook of all things, and my screen froze. And in the middle of the screen was an advertisement for Le Cordon Bleu, which was about to open in Boston. It wasn't even open yet. And I couldn't do anything. Control Alt Delete wasn't working. I couldn't get the screen to unfreeze. I couldn't restart the computer. So finally, for the fuck of it, I clicked on the ad and it brought me right to the website. It was like, it was like Kismet. It was like, hey, guess what? You're going to culinary school. They called me back within 10 minutes. And the next day I was at the recruiter's office and, talking about going to culinary school. And yeah, I was one of the oldest, not the oldest. There were a couple of people older than me, a couple of people in their 60s even. Um, so I started culinary school. And, I got my uniform, and you put on your uniform for the first time and you're like, wow, I look like a chef, and it was just this overwhelming feeling. It was just awesome. I look like a chef. I know nothing about food, but you're looking in the mirror and you're like, I'm a chef. I'm a chef. And you get there, and the first thing they do the first day of culinary school, and they did it every morning. So this is another thing, like, that you learn as a life lesson, was every day before class started, we had to stand in the hallway and get inspected. And they would inspect you. Could If you went into culinary school with facial hair, you could keep the facial hair that you had, but you couldn't grow new facial hair. So every day they would check to make sure you were shaved. You would hold out your hands and they would inspect that your fingernails were cut and cleaned, and they would inspect that your uniform was clean and pressed. I had to starch the seams on the sleeves of my chef coat because they wanted you crisp, crisp, crisp. The seams on my chef coat could cut paper if I really wanted to, because I was gung ho. I decided I was going to culinary school. So that was every morning. They would send people like, listen, there's a CVS downstairs. Either go to CVS or go home. Go buy a razor or go home. You're not getting into class with that stubble on your face. And they were that serious. So that teaches you a lot about. Obviously, I didn't follow through with this clean shaven thing, but it teaches you how to keep appearances up because they want you to make a good. When you finally get to chef, you have to go out and talk to customers. Customers want to talk to the chef. If you go out there covered in sauce and filthy hands and long, dirty fingernails, no one's gonna eat there. You know what I mean? No one wants to see a disheveled chef. No matter if that's, well, not the fingernails, but the dirty jacket. That happens. You usually have two jackets. One for the kitchen. If you have to go out to the dining room, you usually take off your apron and your jacket and put on your chef coat, not your chef coat, but your chef coat, so that you go out there looking pristine and you know flawless, and then you go back on and put the other one back on so you can get it filthy. Um, So it was every morning was inspection, and you just got used to it. Then they taught you basic skills. So when you join culinary school, they give you a knife kit. It's not just a knife roll. Like you've probably seen chefs on TV unrolling their knife roll. Um, they gave us a kit, and it was like a luggage on wheels, and it had every utensil you could possibly imagine. Every utensil, high temperature spoons that don't melt if you leave it on the fire, and graters, and uh, one knife for every possible iteration of cutting. And the first class in culinary school is knife skills, because without knife skills, you don't belong in the kitchen. If you don't know your way around a knife, you don't belong. You're not going to make it. You don't. You it's too easy to hurt yourself if you don't know what you're doing. It's the whole. That's why the whole first class is knife skills, because one, they want you to have precision. Fine dining is very precise in the cuts, and if you're not precise with your cuts, or and they're irregular, or they're what we call a bracelet cut, is when you cut something but the end of it's all stuck together, so you pick it up and it all comes with it. Like you're slicing a cucumber or something, and you slice all the way down, and then you pick it up and they're all connected at the end, and we call that a bracelet cut, because when you pull it apart, it looks like a bracelet. uh, you know you do that in knife skills, and the chef comes over and is like, all right, you're not putting your knife all the way through, you're just going down, you're not following through, you got to finish your cut. So, you learn things like that in knife skills, basic brunoise and all the different cuts, 16th of an inch here, an eighth of an inch there, and batons, and all the things that, you see a chef on TV, or, if you know a chef and you watch them cut, and that's hours and hours and hours and hours of practice. They teach that right away. You practice, when I was in knife skills 1, by the way, there's a second one. When I was in knife skills 1, homework was go buy 10 pounds of celery and cut it into 16th of an inch pieces, and then figure out something to do with it so you're not wasting celery. Like, that was homework. Go get a bag of onions and cut all the onions up. I made a lot of soup in knife skills because I had a lot of the ingredients for soup all the time. I had all these tiny little pieces of vegetables that are pretty much only good for, presentation or soups and stuff. And that's what you did. You practice your knife skills, and you cut yourself a lot, and you got better by the day, or you didn't. For a couple of, a lot of the people who started knife skills 1 didn't make it through the class because it was just intense. You're cutting all day. You spend 6 hours in class just cutting, 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 cutting. You develop your chef's callus. So if you're right-handed, the chef's callus is always on the first pad of your index finger, because that's where you grip the knife. You grip the knife right there, and all that motion causes friction on your finger. You get a knife callus. And that's Bourdain said you could always tell another chef when he shook his hand because you'd feel the callus. But that doesn't work for me because I'm left-handed. So my callus is always on my left hand. So the handshake thing doesn't work for me, but you can always tell a chef by the callus on their finger. What's up, kid? Do you love your hometown and want to represent it to the fullest? Of course you do, bud. Whether you're going to the spa, running the dunks, or driving down the Cape for the weekend, Boston Bread is the perfect gear to keep you looking wicked fresh, dude. Go to bostonbread.com right now and enter the offer code Botchilism to get your first order. That's Botchilism for 10% off. And remember the motto, guy: Boston born, Boston bred, and when we die, we'll be Boston dead. So then after knife skills, you move on to the actual bulk of what you're going to do in culinary school. It's where you learn how to cook. So because I was part of the inaugural class for my culinary school, we were the first people there. So we got to do something really cool. We got to open all the boxes and set up the kitchen, because when we went into all of our first classes, it was just a room full of boxes. So the first day or two of class was opening up all this new equipment that we'd never seen before, and washing it and learning how to put it together. And before we ever touched food, we got to set up each kitchen, which was amazing. And that's not something that everyone gets to do, because you can only have one inaugural class. So that first class really gets a taste of what's to come when you start setting up kitchens. You know what I mean? When you're setting up restaurants and stuff like that, we got our first taste of, how do you put this food processor together, which is not as easy as it sounds. Or, what plates do we stack together? What pans, here, how do we get the sticker off of this brand new pan so we can cook with it? Stuff like that. It was really cool. It was an amazing experience to be able to open a culinary school like that, to go class by class and open the culinary schools, each class, But you get into basic cooking next, and you know you don't appreciate basic cooking until you get into a class like that. And you realize you know nothing about it. You think you know how to cook until you get into culinary school, and then it's not cooking your way anymore. It's cooking someone else's way, and hundreds of years of practice to get the best techniques out of the ingredients is now being handed to you, and you're expected to learn how to do these techniques. And it's a lot of pressure. Culinary school is intense because the whole time you're there, they're telling you, listen, you have 2 hours to make this dish now, but you have 40 minutes to make it when you're when you're in a restaurant. So they let you limp your way into cooking, but with that constant reminder that it's not like this in the real world. You're not going to have a whole day to make 4 dishes. You have to make 4 dishes every 10 minutes. You know what I mean? So they really try to instill that in you, that you know you're taking your time now, but it's going to be a lot more intense when you get out there. But that's where you learn how to sear. That's where you learn how to grill. That's where you learn how to, there's a butchery class. You learn how to break down giant pieces of meat into individual cuts. You learn international cuisine, American cuisine. Uh, God manger was my favorite. God manger was a lot of cold preparation, but that's where we also learned how to smoke. So we learned how to smoke meat and cure meat and smoke meat in God manger. That was my favorite class, making sopressata and salami and pates and all that shit. That was the most fun. That class really sparked my interest. We also had to take baking, which is most chefs' Achilles heel is baking. Not all chefs. There are chefs that do savory and sweet, but not this one. I'm all savory, no sweet. So baking was a struggle. A struggle. I had a very old school baking instructor who had learned in Paris. He slept on flour sacks when he was 13 years old just so he could be an apprentice at this bakery. And he was one of the most amazing bakers I've ever seen. He could make buttercream look like fondant. It was amazing. And if you know what I mean, then you know what I mean. It's too in depth to explain. But he was very upset with me for yet again fucking up biscuits or bread, or this happened to be biscuits, but I fucked up the bread. I fucked up everything. I was a terrible baker, and he just had enough, and he whacked me with a fucking French rolling pin. And as a 32-year-old man, I didn't know how to respond to getting whacked with a rolling pin. So that's how old school he was. And I kind of laughed it off and actually became a better baker because of it, because I didn't want to get whacked again. So that's culinary school. That doesn't often happen in culinary school, and I'm sure if anyone had ever found out, he would have been in a lot of trouble. But that was just his mentality, and it worked. Scared the crap out of me, and made me want to bake better. Uh, but the main thing you learn in culinary school is how to build technique. The restaurant that we ran in the culinary school was named Technique because it was fitting. Like, what you don't learn how to be a cook in culinary school. You learn techniques. You learn different techniques. You learn basic techniques. You learn advanced techniques, and it's a building block for being a cook. And do you need culinary school? No, I mean, you can, if you're ambitious enough and you're willing to learn enough, you can get a job of as a prep cook or a dishwasher in a restaurant, and you can work your way up, and you'll learn just as much. But it's just an easier way to do it because you spend all of your time working on the basic techniques. It's a lot of money. Culinary school's expensive, but it looks good on a resume, and it teaches you the basis. They see a culinary school on your resume. A chef's going to be like, well, I don't have to teach him as much as I have to teach someone who didn't go to culinary school. So are you more likely to get a job? It's possible. Self-taught cooks excel. But I went the culinary school route because I didn't know how else to do it. And when I was in culinary school, I took a job as a dishwasher. So I was going to school from 6:45 in the morning I would be at school at 6:45. I would leave school. I'd be at work at about 1 in the afternoon, maybe 2 in the afternoon. A long time ago now, I don't really remember. But let's go 2. And then I'd work till about 1 o'clock in the morning. And that was so, homework was done on the train. There's no time to do homework. You get home from work and you sleep because, especially as a dishwasher, you just bust your ass for the whole shift. And then by the time you're done, you're exhausted. You're the last one done. The dishwasher's always the last one done because everyone empties their entire station and puts it in the dish pit, and then they scrub and mop and stuff like that. And cleaning a kitchen takes anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half if you're fast and you're good at it. And the dishwasher's not done by then. You know what I mean? It usually lasts. A lot of places will give the dishwasher taxi vouchers so that they can take the taxi home because public transportation stopped running by the time they get out. But like I said before, and this is the most important thing about kitchens, is you always take care of the dishwasher. They keep the engine running. So I became a dishwasher, much to the chagrin of all the other dishwashers because I was inexperienced, and they just liked how passionate I was, and they wanted to give me the job. I applied for saute, I think, and I I was too green, and they weren't ready to give me a saute job. Uh, that's the most important job in the kitchen. So no, I didn't get the saute job, but they liked how passionate I was and how energetic I was, and I did a stage, which is, kind of like an audition. You do a shift for free, and if they see how well you follow directions and how well how good your technique is, and so they thought I was good enough to keep on the staff. They put me in the dish pit, and I got my ass kicked every day with a smile because I was just happy to be in a kitchen. But I made such an impression that when the saute cook left, and I was already out of school at this point, but when the saute cook left, I was the first person they picked to get on saute because now I had a little bit of time under my belt. I'd done prep work, I had done dishwashing, and they were ready to give me a chance, and they didn't have to, but they did. And so I moved. I kind of skipped prep a little bit. I didn't spend a whole lot of time in prep, but again, going to culinary school kind of doubles as your time in the prep kitchen. That's pretty much what you're doing in culinary school is learning how to prep food. So I jumped right up to the saute. Busy restaurant. Just, turn after turn and customer after customer, and it was an open kitchen, and they converted a bar into a kitchen, so the kitchen is behind the bar, and you can sit at the kitchen and talk to the cooks. You're only 3 feet away. So as a first time cook, that was 1,000 times more pressure, as now all these people can see me when I fuck up, and that's what you're thinking about when you first start. Is like you're first in the kitchen, you're like, I'm gonna fuck this up, and it's inevitable. You're gonna fuck it up, but a good chef will teach you how to bounce back after you fuck it up. But being in an open kitchen like that, where people can literally hear everything you're saying and watch everything you do, and it's just an added pressure. So that was trial by fire. I jumped in feet first into a very busy station with no experience, and had to learn my way. And that was uh, that was the end of my culinary school, was working at the same time. So that was a lot of long hours and busy days and working on the weekends. So I didn't finish as much as I wanted to as a dishwasher. I had to stop doing it for a little while because I couldn't focus on school and doing the dishes. So um, the other thing you learn in culinary school, and this is going to sound funny, but there's a lot of math involved. Uh, Not just in recipes and equations and all that. Yeah, the first math class is all about converting fractions and all the basic stuff that you do in recipe planning. But it's deeper than that. I talked before about the cost of of running a restaurant, and we had whole classes just about food cost and labor cost, and what it costs to run a restaurant with the rent and the utilities, and we had whole classes that teach you how to do the restaurant math, basically, specifically restaurant math. And, without knowing how to do food cost or labor cost, you're going to tank because if you're paying people too much and you're not bringing enough in and you don't know, the next thing you know, you're out of money. Same thing with food. If you don't know how to cost out your food, you're not going to get you're going to get the wrong ingredients. You're going to get too many ingredients. Food's going to go bad. You're not going to understand why because you don't understand the basic math of running a restaurant. So it was really important to learn math in culinary school. And that's definitely one thing I would say is a benefit of culinary school is, going into it knowing that you're going to have to do all these things, that you're going to have to plan menus, that you have to create menus. We had a menu creation class where we didn't do any cooking. We just created new menus every day. Like, tomorrow create a barbecue menu. Tomorrow create a French menu. Give us a Tuscan menu, and everything had to be correct. As I said, took a saute job after culinary school. I spent 2 years in that job, and it was the best job I've ever had. It was unbelievable learning something new every day and working with this amazing chef who was my mentor and really gave me a chance and had faith in me and yelled at me when I did something stupid, which I did a lot because I didn't know what I was doing. But really made me into the cook that I became just by teaching me things and you know showing me a better way to do it. Yeah, I know this is what they showed you in culinary school, but don't you think this works a little better? And you know, she is also one of those people who is savory and sweet. So we had to make desserts, and she walked in on me one day, uh, trying to hand whip whipped cream. And I just knew I was doing it wrong because she just shook her head at me and she didn't say anything. And she just walked over and took the whisk out of my hand and tucked my elbow into my side and cocked my wrist and put the whisk back, took my wrist and started going like this and didn't say a word, just fixed me and walked out. Like she was just so disgusted by the way I was doing it. She was just like, no, no, not do it this way. She just literally put my body in the position it was supposed to be in. And it was more effective. It was it was way easier on my wrist and my elbow. While my hand, I'm sure my hand was all over the place. You know what I mean? But she just fixed it for me. You know what I mean? And that's what a chef does. They hire you for who you are, and then they mold you into the cook they want you to be. That's the basis of what it is. Hiring someone. You have an idea of what you want as a chef, and it's your job to figure out how to get everyone to do it that way. So you have to make it easy for them to understand, adaptable. Not everyone does everything the way you do it, so you have to have a little bit of wiggle room. And that's what I learned from my first chef. And I moved on to other restaurants from there, and I did a little bit of everything. I did some Italian cuisine, I did a lot of Asian cuisine. I worked at burger joints, gourmet delis. I did a little bit of institutional cooking. I was in charge of an culinary program for an eating disorder clinic. You know, where they don't want to eat, so you have to make food taste good and be visually appealing, so that these people who don't want to eat don't have another reason to not want to eat. You have to really make it visually appealing. So that was a whole nother branch of food. Institutional cooking for hospitals is completely different. And then the most important one, in between a couple of cooking jobs, I was out of work. Uh, I had burned out a little bit from this crazy job that I had, and I needed a little time off. I needed to recoup, and at the same time, my mother left her job and had a giant severance package, so she decided we should buy a restaurant. So we did our research, and we spent about 6 months on menu planning, and then we started looking for a place, which was originally supposed to be a market. We wanted to open a market where I could do charcuterie and make cheese and make pickles and stuff like that. And that was originally supposed to be what we were going to do, but there's nowhere that's just a storefront. You know what I mean? You don't just get a storefront. You got to get a restaurant. The, they just don't exist the way we wanted it to. So we ended up leasing a defunct sub shop with a big front. We fit 29 seats in the front of the sub shop, and it had a full size kitchen. It was huge. Kitchen was huge. It came with everything we needed, 60 quart mixer, and but we went in with no experience, and we did it all wrong. I'm not ashamed to say that we fucked it up, and we fucked it up good. We fucked it up good. We went in with an idea of what it was like. I had experience in the restaurant, never as a chef. I kind of made myself an executive chef, which is never a good idea. Uh, and we just created a menu, and we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't go in with much capital, so I could only hire like two cooks. And I had this brilliant idea to do everything from scratch. So we were making the bread, we were making the condiments, we made ketchup, we made mustard, we made fucking ginger ale, we made everything, and we did it with three people because we thought we could. But it wasn't sustainable. The three of us were exhausted all the time, and I also the menu was kind of broad. There was no real concept to the menu. I had Moroccan dishes, I had Asian dishes, I had American dishes, I had Italian dishes. And that's what you learn. You learn from your mistakes. We were a little too broad in everything that we tried to do. We didn't have a tight concept. That's why you usually stick to one cuisine or maybe two. You don't try to mix everything you learned in culinary school and everything you learned in the restaurant business onto one menu. It just becomes confusing. Do I you give people too many choices and they're gonna lose interest. And we did a lot of that. So we narrowed the menu down and started doing a little better. But like I said, we were making everything from scratch. So if something ran out if we were running low on something mid service, we knew that there was extra prep involved because now we have to make that thing from scratch. You know, we made soup from scratch, and I mean on a la minute. In the minute, we made leek and potato soup in like 8 minutes. So we were just way ambitious and way understaffed, and I didn't know how to price things. I took a basic menu course in culinary school, but pricing is pricing goes with the market value. You can't price a menu out unless you have that product in front of you and you know how much you paid for it by pound. So I didn't do food cost the right way when we were opening the restaurant. I just yeah, we'll charge $20 for this and $15 for that, and this one seems like it should be less, so we'll charge 10 for this. Not even doing the food cost, which is it was my own fault, but it definitely shouldn't have done it. So we knew nothing about pricing whatsoever. Uh, we didn't have vendors in the beginning. We were trying to do it out of a supply chain, and going to the store every morning, and that just added to the grind. After making bread, we'd go to the store and get all the ingredients we needed for the day, and then come back. And, you're already tired at that point, and then you got to prep, and then you got to cook. And then lunch is over, and you got to get to dinner, and then you got to get through dinner. And we were so small as an organization that we couldn't afford to hire anyone to do the dishes. So at the end of every service, we'd have to do the dishes from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. And you accrue a lot of dishes during the day, pots, pans. I mean, the only thing the servers used to run the plates so that we'd have plates, but that was it. They didn't do any of the kitchen equipment. And, you'd scramble if you needed a food process or something. You'd scramble over the dish pit trying to find it, trying to get it, trying to clean it, trying to get back on the line as quick as you could. But then you knew at the end of every day that at 11 o'clock, someone was doing those dishes. And it was pretty much me, my sous chef, and one cook. And the other cook, my cook, was in culinary school during the day and working for me at night. So I couldn't keep him to do the dishes. So it's pretty much me or my sous chef or both most of the time doing the dishes. So at 11 o'clock when the doors close, you probably got another 2 hours of dishes to do. Just lesson learned there. You know, probably could have done it with two cooks and a dishwasher instead of three cooks and no dishwasher, and would have been a lot happier. And then the biggest mistake we made was location. We wanted to stay in my hometown, and we really wanted to bring back a community business. That sense of community in the town, and we worked with the city, and we got grants and we got money from the city, and we opened in the city that I grew up in and my mother grew up in, and the the locals just hated it. They called it fancy. They called it expensive. Even though I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on the menu, it was too fancy. So none of our business was local, and that's a big hit. You need the local business. You can't just depend on people coming from other cities to go to your restaurant. You need that local business. You need the people walking by every day, and we couldn't get it because you know, it just the city wasn't ready for culinary. It is now, but it wasn't then. So location is hugely important when you own a business, parking, stuff like that. Things you don't think about. So we got to the point where this is how we decided to close. We had to decide if we were going to buy food for the day or pay the staff. And that's a tough decision, Do you want to open for the day and buy food and see if you can string the staff along until you make more money? Or do you. So we just decided to close the doors. You just admit failure at that point and you move on. And, failure is a thing in the restaurant business. Like 95% of all restaurants fail in the first 5 years because it's a hard business. And, I was there. I was there. I failed. I learned from it and I grew. That's what you do. That's the basic underlying factor in all of cooking is you're going to fail. And when you fail, it's just how you pick yourself back up and, learn from it and do better next time. And, that's pretty much a tenet in cooking is, yep, you're going to fail, but it's how you deal with that failure. You dust yourself off and remember what you did wrong and make sure you never do it that way again. It's as simple as that. That's about it for today. All right, so you can follow us on social media. We have TikTok, we have Instagram. It's Botchilism, Botchilism, both places. And if you have a story you want to tell, if you were a bartender or a manager or just worked in the restaurant, you got a restaurant story you want to tell, I'd love to hear it. Maybe I can read it. Maybe you can read it. Maybe you can tell it by, tell it on your own. So email us at botchilismpodcast@gmail.com. And thanks for joining us.